The morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Well, the sky was a deep blue and the snow was almost 2 feet deep, and my good young gelding Stanley was jogging along while a cowboy song was playing in my mind. Wow, that was the first time I'd been horseback since we got back from the cruise, and man, it felt good. Still a little while before calving starts, but this week you'll hear a calving adventure that was shared by one of our cruise gang recently.
The good news was when he got bucking, he scared the calf away, so he didn't come back across the creek.
That's well-known Alberta rancher Ron Hansen, and knowing Ron like I do, you can be sure it all happened just the way he tells it. And now Baxter Black has an innovative idea. Not sure how practical it is, though.
Came up with the perfect answer for this overabundance of bulls. Outlaw polygamy in cows.
And there's a lot happening on the rangeland news this week, including this kind of information.
Number of heifers and heifer calves in feedlots down 7% from a year ago, lowest percent of inventory in at least 20 years.
And we have another real fitting piece of cowboy poetry.
Old Bay now settles down a bit. Bill's nerves are calm and cool until that darn old cell phone rings and Bronc acts like a fool.
And Ivan Daines has a classic Song of the West this week, and I'll give you the story behind the song. And on the horse training file, a rider has a problem. Every time she gets her horse into a lope, he's in one lead in front and the opposite lead behind. And I'll suggest a few things that might solve this problem we call crossfiring. And Don Howard has a story from his experience running a dude string in the mountains. It involves a snorty horse and a gang of bikers right after Marvin Odell and the Red Hot Rhythm Rustlers.
She's been punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire.
But when the weekend comes, I'll tell you boys, this cowgirl's heart ain't in it.
No more punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire. Time to hit that polished dance floor and start letting off some steam.
'Cause he's been punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire.
Just like a locomotive running off a trestle high.
He's done with punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire. So chin your fiddle, fiddle man, and rosin up your bow. Grab your guitar, guitar man, and please don't pick it slow.
Play me a tune to warm a cowboy's heart in a Texas swinging style.
'Cause we've been punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire.
She's been punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire.
Our boots will be ablaze when we go scooting round that dancing floor.
Ain't no more punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire. Y'all get out of the way now, this couple's coming through. And sawdust will be smoking when I dance this dance with you. To the Rose of San Antone we heard when Bob Wills was the king. We're tired of punching cows, setting posts and stretching wire. punching cows, setting posts, and stretching wire.
Well, Don Howard and his wife Carmen are longtime ranchers from the shortgrass country, but a few years back they moved out to the wilderness of BC and ran a dude string, and that led to a lot of adventures you can read about in Don's book, Under the Cow Patty. Here's one of them.
I was just thinking about out in the Squamish when I ran that horse ranch out there, and there's a big red horse that they said don't anybody ride when we got there because he'd run away with you. So I took him over to the Patterson training track, and I got on him because I liked the way the horse moved. And when I stepped up on him, I knew it was absolutely true. That horse took off, and we went about 3-4 laps around that track, and I had no control on him. There's a pull as hard as you like, and he would just go faster. So I took him home and said, nobody, don't put any dudes on that horse. And then Carmen was looking after it. The next day I was up on a trail ride with some riders, and these two bikers come in, and they insisted on riding this horse and another horse that was a bad one. And she said, don't do it. She warned them, and there was a lawyer standing beside her, and he said, I'll be your witness. He said, let them go. So they got on this Big Red, they called him, and he took off across the open place there, and he hit the tree line about going full out. And when he come back in 20 minutes later, Big Red was carrying his front leg a little, but the rider had no chaps. They were tore off him. His goggles were hanging on his ear, and he was all scratched in his face. So anyway, Carmen didn't charge him for the ride. He got off.
She didn't make him pay for it.
Took off on his bike.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anyway, this is really nice here, just floating across the Pacific Ocean, just a little bit south of Cabo San Lucas, heading for Puerto Vallarta, but darn it, I still kind of miss my horses at home, I'm looking forward to getting back on them.
Yeah, I'll bet you are.
Well, that was from a conversation we had during the recently concluded Spirit of the West cruise, sitting there in the sunshine with ranchers Don Howard, Russ Peak, and Ron Hansen. And Ron remembers the time he went out to retrieve a stray calf while he was riding a bronchi horse, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. The Hansen family have been prominent in the cattle business for about 3 generations now, and they're known for good quality cattle and great ranch horses. Ron and Renee Hansen have been with us on several Spirit of the West cruises, and we all love sharing our true life adventures. So this colt, you'd started and you made some progress with him, and then he would get a wire cut or something would go wrong, so you'd treat him for a couple of months, and then you'd ride him for a while.
Yeah, he kept on. The good news was he kept on through the fence with the same foot and got the wire cut in the same spot every time. But for 3 times I did this. By the time I got him finally all healed up and got going on him, he was 4 years old, and so we're riding, and he was coming pretty nice, but every time I had to push him to get by a cow, he'd tighten up, and trying to tell you he was going to do something, so I'd pull up, and he was a pretty smart horse because he got to know, and every time I got to push it, he did that. Finally I thought, well, I'll fix him. So he started to tighten up, and I jabbed him once, and did he unwind. Bucked me off and bucked all around me, and then I got on him, and it was over. But a little while later, we were calving cows, and this calf was across the creek, and I'd throw this calf across the creek and get on my horse, and he didn't want to cross the stream very bad, and the calf would swim back. And this
calf would go swim back to the other side.
To me. And so the 3rd time I throw him on, I jump on, and I'm going to push him across there, and I jabbed him, and he unwound and bucked me off and bucked up the hill. I walk up and get him and get on, and the good news was when he got bucking, he scared the calf away, so he didn't come back across the creek. And I'm looking at these cows, and I can't see them very good. I bought a new pair of glasses, and I'd lost them and hadn't thought of them. So I ride down, and I'm afraid to step on these glasses looking for these things. My son come down and helped me find them, but that was the last time that horse ever bucked.
Wow.
He wound up being a great horse. I sold him to a big ranch out west of Williams Lake, and they thought he was one of the best ranch horses they'd ever had. He was strong and cowy, and
It's funny, sometimes they go through all of that, and you get past that, and they turn out pretty good. I know Miles Kingdon, a friend that was cow boss at Quashana for years. He rides for Coldstream Ranch now, but fine horseman, great roper, top hand, and he says, yeah, sometimes you just got to ride through those rough spots.
You got that right, and it's a lot more fun when you can make the ride.
Yeah, that's for sure. Although there's been a few split pelvises and things from guys that have made the ride and split their pelvis in the process.
Yeah, there's times when you wonder if it would have been softer landing.
Yeah, I think so. Well, our good friend Ken Overcast is a fine musician and a longtime rancher from Chinook, Montana. He's got a true story about a bunch of Holstein calves that wound up on his place. And that's after we pull the wraps off of Dave Stamey's latest album. It's called Western Stories, and I think you'll like this one. Dave calls it Sell Me a Pony.
Mister, could you sell me a pony to carry me home? I'm tired of being afoot, tired of being alone. The winds are getting cold now, hope I ain't waited too long. Mister, could you sell me a pony to carry me home? Oh, sell me a pony to carry me home. Make him deep in the hard girth, he's gotta go many a mile. I need him to be good-footed, I need him just a little bit wild. We gotta cross many a mountain before I see my baby smile. Mister, could you sell me a pony to carry me home? Oh, sell me a pony to carry me home. Open the gates, swing it wide, no time to waste. My baby's waiting for me on the other side. Mister, do you have a saddle that I could ride? It's been a long time since I was mounted, been a long time since I tried. Nothing like a good old A-fork to give me back my pride. Mister, could you sell me a pony to carry me home? Oh, sell me a pony to carry me home. Open the gate, swing it wide, no time to waste. My baby's waiting for me on the other side. Could you show me the trail, show me where I went wrong? Where was that turn that left me out here for so long? Show me the way to give me back my song. Mister, could you sell me a pony to carry me home? Oh, sell me a pony to carry me home.
Dave Stamey actually grew up in Montana, and he lives in California now. Ken Overcast went to West Chinook High School, and he and his wife Dawn run the family ranch in the shadow of the Bear Paw Mountains not far from Chinook. And a while back, Ken told us this story.
We bought this piece of property at some hayland a few years ago, and we bought it for the hay ground, but there was a dairy farm on the place, and golly, I'm not any kind of a dairy farmer, but this guy, all this stuff was there. It was all set up for dairy farming, and this old boy drove in the yard one day, and he said, you know, I'm looking for a dairy barn to rent. Do you know where I could find one? Well, golly, it ain't any good for anything else. So I thought, well, yeah, I mean, this is the place to do it, you know. So he rented the barn, and I sold him a little extra feed we had, and gee, it was just working out great. Well, that lasted for a little while, and then he got tired of milking cows, and like a dang fool, I bought them from him. I thought it was too good of a deal to pass up. I got a check twice a month, and I hired a guy to milk the cows, and it was all supposed to work out. But it didn't. But anyway, one night I was playing music a couple nights a week, and I got stuck milking those cows because our hired man quit. And so I was getting home. We had to play music till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to get up at 4 and start milking cows. And I don't know if that's a good way to kill yourself or not, but it'll work, you know. Yeah. So I hit the sack early one night, and we had the vet was coming out to AI some cows, and my wife said, well, she'll stay up and show him which cows he needed to take care of, and you just go ahead and go to bed. She's taking care of it for me. And I just laid down, and she woke me up, and it was probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night. It was really early. And she said, we got a half a dozen of those dairy heifers, those yearling heifers have busted out of their pen back there, the replacement heifers, and they're down in the creek. We live right on Lodge Creek there in northern Montana. And they're stuck in the creek and they can't get out, you know. You know, there ain't nothing dumber than a bucket calf, you know.
I know. Yeah.
And so I very compassionately said, well, just let the dad burn things drown then. If they're alive in the morning, I'll pull them out. And she couldn't let that happen, so she went down, she called up a neighbor lady, and they went, and the vet said, well, now you can finally get some rest. You know, Dawn works so hard there on the ranch, and she was just wore out too. And she said, no, we can't get any rest. We got to get those heifers out of the creek. And so he volunteered to help her. And so they spent all night out there in that creek with a winch truck and those 2 women and the vet. And they fell in 2 or 3 times, and they sicked the dog on the heifers, and I don't know what all they did. They finally winched them out of there. It was a terrible mess, you know. And she didn't get back in the house till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I just couldn't wait to run into the vet, you know, because he's a real good friend of mine. I've known him for years. And so I ran into him in town, and about a week later, and it was in front of a big crowd of folks. And I said, you know, I really appreciate you helping get those heifers out of the creek, but I said, you know, the way you vets charge, you better not send me a bill for that, because I didn't hire you to pull those heifers out of the creek. Now you're on your own. But I said, if after spending all night with my wife in the brush down by the creek, you dang sure better send me a bill.
And in the meantime, there they were, struggling away all night long. You're just having the sleep of your life.
Oh yeah, I'm just sleeping away.
You'll hear another great story from Ken and a fine song about his home state that he will sing just a little bit later. Next, Baxter Black looks into outlawing polygamy for bulls, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan. Call the dogs and put out the fire. This is Baxter Black on Monday, here to start the week with a little peek at cow polygamy. What holds the loaded 30,000-pound trailer to the heavy-duty truck? What holds the 38-foot RV trailer to the dually? What holds the 2-horse trailer with your daughter's favorite pony to the half-ton pickup? Well, the odds are it's a B&W trailer hitch, probably a turnover bowl, American-made, employee-owned, customer-tuned, and proud of their part in America's greatness. B&W, holding things together down the road. I was visiting with Nina after their bull sale this spring. She remarked on the overabundance of bulls for sale around the country this year. Competition was stiff. Well, her husband, Bob, ever the deep thinker, pondered on the dilemma, and he came up with the perfect answer for this overabundance of bulls. Outlaw polygamy in cows. Well, by gosh, I thought, a solution that fits the times. 1 bull per cow. But then I began to think it through. Would each cowage, as opposed to marriage in horses, be intended for life, or would we allow for divorce and recowage, or dehorse and remarriage? Would a cowaged pair be allowed to mingle with other cowaged couples in the pasture? Could both the bull and the cow be trusted to ignore the lip-curling, tail-rubbing, and perfume of others? Would they stoically pay no attention if sidled up to and mounted by a less disciplined member of their community? Or would each couple be fenced in a small enclosure loosely based on a suburban housing development, one where each morning the bull would be driven to an 8-to-5 field with other bulls to spend the day grazing and grumbling about the rancher the bullfights in Mexico City and how alfalfa ain't what it used to be. Would the cows, likewise, drop their calves off at daycare and go to their respective cow field, where they'd eat grass, talk about their calves, and share fantasies about bull pictures in the artificial insemination calendar? Would cowages be arranged, or would courtship be allowed? Would chaperones be required at the weaning prom? And if a bull was caught posing as a molasses salesman and making unwanted advances at the house cow, would he be hamburger at sunrise? Well, after considerable rumination, I have concluded that trying to work out the details of outlawing polygamy in cows might put an end to it before it began. Even if we passed the law, the plan would probably fail anyway. You see, cows have never felt guilty about practicing polygamy in the first place, and no amount of political correctness training or moral browbeating would make these now consenting polygamists consider asking that basic question, the one that separates cowkind from mankind. I know you love me, but will you respect me next estrus?
This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by B&W Turnover Bowl.
How about a weekend pass to the 20th anniversary edition of the Kamloops Cowboy Festival, March 17th to 20th, 2016. What a lineup of entertainers. Tom Cole, Brian Solomon, Alan Moberg, Gary Felgard, Ed Peekycoot, Tim Huss, the Western Spirit Band, and many of the performers from the very first festival 20 years ago. There's the BC Cowboy Hall of Fame inductions, the Spirit of the West Rising Star Showcase, dinner shows, evening concerts, and a wonderful art and gear show with the best artisans in the West. Workshops on everything from guitar picking to songwriting with the best experts in the field. For folks in Alberta, Frontier Bus Lines has a great package trip, and for folks in Saskatchewan, so does Westwood Tours. You can get all the information at bcchs.com or call 1-888-763-2221. Just ahead of the Rangeland News, where we'll hear from Gary Crawford, of course, and a special report from Curtis Anderson, this song always takes me back to my school days, and I was not a very good student, and all I could think about was being out horseback somewhere, and in the classroom I'd have my textbook open on my desk, but inside the textbook would be another book from the library written by Will James. His amazing stories, unique rustic writing style, and fantastic illustrations made the cowboy world come alive. And Ian Tyson wrote this fitting tribute, sung here by Don Edwards.
When I was but a small boy, Father bought me many books about the creatures of the river banks and the sins of old sea cooks. But the ones I never left behind with those long forgotten games were the tales of wild and windy slopes by the man they called Will James. The living of his cowboy dreams, or so it seemed to me, the perfect combination, riding high and living free. His heroes were his horses, and he drew them clear and true, and on every page they'd come alive and they'd jump straight out at you. His race toward the sunset was the high and lonesome kind, like the coyote always looking back, he left no tracks behind. So I've memorized those pictures, boys, they're still the very best. If whiskey was his mistress, then his true love was the West. I remember up on Dead Man's Creek back 30 years or more, I hired out the breaking colts, which I'd never done before. A city kid, I asked myself now, what would Will James do? And you know it was the damnedest thing, but it kinda got me through. His race to toward the sunset was the high and lonesome kind. Like the coyote always looking back, he left no tracks behind. I've memorized those pictures, boys, they're still the very best. If whiskey was his mistress, then his true love was the West. And his race toward the sunset was the high and lonesome kind. Like the coyote always looking back, he left no tracks behind. So I've memorized those pictures, boys, they're still the very best. If whiskey was his mistress, then his true love was the West. If whiskey was his mistress, then his true love was the West.
Now the news of the rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West. We'll tell you what's new under the western sky right after this word from the cattlemen of Western Canada.
BC cattle producers have funded food safety research throughout Western Canada to help develop new methods of delivering high-quality, safe beef products. This ensures that beef has the same great quality.
Now the Rangeland News. Top of page 1, the latest cattle on feed numbers from the U.S. indicate that herd expansion is well underway. With more, here's Gary Crawford.
USDA report on feedlot activity last month shows that feedlots brought in 1.53 million head of cattle, 1% below December a year ago. Marketing's up 1%, leaving feedlots January 1st with a fairly low 10.9 million head, down less than 1% from a year earlier. Agriculture Department livestock analyst Shale Shagam says,
and that's to some extent to be expected. Feedlot margins have been very, very poor. And there's a real need on the part of feedlot operators to push down the price of feeder calves
by delaying placements. One telling number, the number of heifers and heifer calves in feedlots down 7% from a year ago, lowest percent of inventory in at least 20 years.
That would be an indication that producers are probably holding back female stock for addition to the breeding herd.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
The province of Saskatchewan will be getting $7.8 million in beef and forage research funding from the federal and provincial governments. The record amount includes 5-year core funding for the Prairie Swine Center and the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization that we all know and love as VITO, plus $800,000 from third-party organizations, and the money will be spent on 26 research projects throughout the Agriculture Development Fund. Recipients include the University of Saskatchewan, the Western Beef Development Centre, Agriculture Canada, the Saskatchewan Bison Association, the Prairie Swine Centre, and the University of Regina. Well, videos and photos are making their way across the internet after a Hereford steer fled the Jamaica Archer Live Poultry and Meat Market in the Jamaica Queens neighborhood of New York City last week. The steer ran through traffic, past stores, and a lot of people. Recording the incident on smartphones, officers with the New York Police Department 103rd Precinct managed to rope the steer and load it into a stock trailer. A Saskatchewan rodeo family is still looking for some irreplaceable items that were stolen from their place near Paynton last fall. The suspects made off with a 1995 Canadian champion steer wrestling buckle, 3 National Finals rodeo go-round buckles, a 1995 Cheyenne Frontier Days champion buckle, Canadian Finals go-round buckles, and a CFR average winner buckle. A total of 8 championship buckles, rings, knives, and a money clip were stolen. The suspects also took a black 2010 Dodge Ram Laramie truck and a 16-gauge shotgun. Those rodeo champion belt buckles and rings belonged to Todd Bogust, Saskatchewan cowboy who died 15 years ago, and the Bogust family is offering a $5,000 reward for any information that leads to the recovery of the items. So if anyone has information regarding the theft, they can contact the RCMP in Saskatchewan at 306-893-4800 or Crime Stoppers 1-800-222-8477. Now here's something pretty positive. Motivational speaker, former bull rider, and all-round inspiring cowboy Curtis Anderson left this on our answering machine last week.
Hello, Bill and Hugh. This is Curtis Anderson. The 2015 Courage Canada Trail Ride raised $24,950 to help brain injury survivors, their family, and the Canadian Pro Rodeo Sports Medicine Team. And $3,000 will be donated to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, proceeds from the silent auction. Since 2004, the Courage Canada Trail Ride has raised $147,000 and $435 to help brain injury survivors and their family and the Canadian Pro Rodeo Sports Medicine Team. And 2016 Courage Canada Trail Ride will be on May 28th. Thank you. Bye.
So be sure and mark that date, May the 28th, Curtis Anderson's Courage Canada Trail Ride. Remember a few years ago, Billy and I hauled Lucky and Cody out there, and beautiful country and just a wonderful time, and it's for a great cause. Well, February the 20th at 1 p.m., there's a big sale at the Innisfail Auction Market, the P&H Bull and Ranch Horse Sale, and you can get all the details at InnisfailAuctionMarket.com. Now that takes us down to the final item. And as you may have heard, the Western Spirit Band will be at the Kamloops Cowboy Festival in March. My guitar-picking brother Jim, our superb bass player Mike, and myself, and we love making music together. And it reminds me of the story of St. Peter as he's checking IDs at the pearly gates. And first comes along a long-time rancher. "Tell me, what have you done in life?" says St. Peter, and the rancher says, "Well, I worked long and hard. I bought land when I could. I finally cashed in when cattle prices went up, and I did very well. So I became quite wealthy, but I didn't sit on my laurels. I divided all my money among my entire family in my will. So our descendants are all set for about 3 generations." St. Peter says, "That's quite something. Come on in." Next, second guy in line has been listening, so he says, "Well, I won the big lottery. But I didn't selfishly just provide for my own family like that rancher guy. I donated all the money to Curtis Anderson's Fund for Brain Injury Research." "Oh, that's wonderful," St. Peter says. "Come on in. Now who's next?" Well, the third guy has been listening, and he says timidly with a downcast look, "Well, I only made about $5,000 in my entire lifetime." "Oh, good heavens," says St. Peter. "And what instrument did you play?" Might have been a bass. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the horse training file, I'll look at a horse that crossfires. That is, when he's loping, he'll be on one lead in front and the opposite lead behind, and it's not comfortable for the rider or the horse. That's next when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. The horse training file looks at a horse that's disunited. What? That means he's crossfiring. And I don't mean he's being used for cowboy-mounted shooting either. It's another problem. First, though, let's talk about the next Spirit of the West cruise. It will hopefully fit that little window between seeding and spring turnout and haying in mid-June 2017. It will be, you guessed it, way up north to Alaska, way up north to Alaska, north to Alaska, we go north, the rush is on. Yeah, the rush is already on. The Spirit of the West gang will fly. We have over 40 people booked already on this one. And the Spirit of the West gang will fly to Anchorage on or around early June 2017. We'll have about 3 days of touring that includes the spectacular Denali National Park Railroad with wildlife roaming free, a look at the highest peak in North America, Mount McKinley, great meals, a fine hotel, and then we board a beautiful cruise ship for a journey down the Inside Passage with side trips to some of Alaska's most famous spots, sailing right into the amazing Vancouver waterfront. And as I said, we already have a bunch of folks signed up for this one. Get all the details on our cruise page at hugh-mclennan.com or call the toll-free number 1-800-530-0131. Now the horse training file. My horse is a thoroughbred with a problem, the lady said. Whenever I try to canter with him, He will be on his left lead behind and the right lead in front, and it's really rough to ride. How can I get him to canter properly? Okay, now when a horse lopes or canters on one lead in front and the opposite lead behind, we call it disunited or crossfiring, and it can really be tough to ride. There are a few things you can do, though, to help him canter properly. Without watching you ride or trying the horse myself, I can't say for sure what'll work, but here's a couple of suggestions. I would work on getting a good leg yield in both directions at a walk. For a leg yield to the left, I just bend his head to my right with gentle pressure from the right direct rein, just to where I can see his right eye while I sit straight in the saddle. Then use gentle pressure from your right calf to encourage him to step slightly to the left while keeping his body straight. Now, once he's crossing his right front foot over his left front and his right hind over his left hind at a walk, I'd work on doing this in both directions at a trot. Now, he's probably ready for a transition from the trot to the canter. Let's say you want his left lead. Trot him straight for a few strides, then get that slight bend and have him trotting while moving diagonally to the left. Lift your left rein to free up his left shoulder. Move your left leg ahead to free up his left hind, and cue him for the lope with your right leg just behind where the stirrup normally hangs. Now, if he does crossfire, drop to a trot and ask for the canter the same way again. If that doesn't work, try working him from the ground with the lead line at least 12 feet long. Work on having him canter around you on a line, and I'm pretty sure he'll have it right. And once he gets that, he'll find it way more comfortable, and so will you. Now, it's interesting that when horses are running free in a pasture, they're always balanced and on the appropriate lead. But if you ever watch cows when they lope, they almost always crossfire. And that's the horse training file. Something our horses really look good in and thrive on, I think, is that daily feeding of Hoffman's horse ration. And Lucky has it every day, and boy, she's doing well, even though she's getting close to 30 years old. You can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. Enjoy the Kamloops Cowboy Festival without the worry of winter driving. Frontier bus lines will leave central Alberta March 17th and return on March 21st. Old Ugly will be on board to entertain, and the tour will include transportation, accommodations, 3 dinner shows, daily breakfast, and weekend passes to the festival. That's 4 nights in Kamloops at the Coast Hotel, the Festival Host Hotel. Boy, to me, that sounds like the best way to travel to the Kamloops Cowboy Festival from all over Alberta. What a fun trip that'll be, with Old Ugly entertaining along the way, and lots of good times. Hope you can sign up and do that. Well, you know, this program has been broadcast for every Sunday morning on K96 Wide Open Country KZIN FM from Shelby, Montana for a lot of years now. And we do have a lot of good friends in that area, including Ken Overcast and his wife Dawn and Wiley Gustafson. And how about this? Wiley wrote this beautiful song and Ken Overcast recorded this fine arrangement of it. By the way, Ken has another great story after he does Wiley's song Montana Lullaby.
The sun's sinking low in the west, and I know another day on the range has gone by. We'll bed down the strays we've been gathering all day with a Montana lullaby. Jenny's at home, waiting alone as the long roundup evenings drag by. But the wind in the pines whispers she's mine with a Montana lullaby. Jenny's at home, waiting alone as the long round-up evenings drag by. But the wind in the pines whispers she's mine with a Montana lullaby.
That's Ken Overcast, and he's a great storyteller, and Billy and I can sure relate to this. When it's preg checking time and the vet's meter is running and you want those cows to just willingly, quietly walk into the chute and stand there, right?
One time we were preg testing, it reminded me of a story. You know, my wife Dawn is just a little bit of a woman, but nobody could push the cows up the chute to suit her because they might be mean to her babies, you know. So I was running the chute, the vet was doing his testing, and she was pushing them in. And one time she had trouble with this big old Hereford cow, just a big old gentle sissy, you know. She just wouldn't go, and Dawn had this tail all twisted up over the top of her back and pulling it down, and she had her shoulder right into this old cow, and the manure was running down the side of her face, and you can get the picture here.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, and she's about a 95-pound woman, you know, and the language got a little bit blue back there at the back of the chute. The vet looked back there at her and he said, you know, pound for pound, he said, I think that's the meanest woman on the face of this earth.
Well, did the Hereford cow go in?
Well, eventually she did, yeah.
Sometimes, you know, the more times those cows run through that chute, and they're usually subject to something that gives them more than a little discomfort every time they go in there, about the fourth or fifth time, they really, if they just stand there and they don't want to go in, sometimes it really does test a person's resolve to get them in.
Yeah, it sure does.
Well, Billy was pushing calves into a calf table, and I used to not even admit that I ever worked at brandings where they used a calf table, but we did work for a fellow one time that wanted to do it that way, so my good rope horse got to stand tied to the fence and watch us pushing calves into the chute, which I thought didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think I was branding or running the knife, and Billy was pushing the calves up into the calf table, and then the two guys that were locking the front end, or locking the head gate and tipping it on its side, were from the city, and really enthusiastic and efficiency conscious and thinking about the time and wasted motion and everything, and then the calf wasn't in there for a second or two, and wham, the chute was over on its side, and one of them was a little slow to go in, so Billy got her head in behind the calf and shoved into the chute, and they slammed the gate, twisted it on its side, and just bulldogged her over like that. And the language was probably some of the words Don used that time.
Could have been, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
We'll look back at another classic Song of the West that Ivan Daines will bring us, and I'll have some information about where the song originated, and then I think you'll really enjoy the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. This is where we look back at another classic Western song and bring you a little bit of information about where the song came from. The lyrics to this one, as far as I can find out, were written as a poem by the Canadian-born cowboy poet legend Henry Herbert Nibbs. He was born in 1874 and he died in 1945. Now, the poem was first published, as far as I could find out, in 1930 under the title The Bosky Steer. Later versions evolved into The Bald-Faced Steer, and then sometime in the 1950s it was set to music and appeared on a single 78 RPM recording by Romaine Loudermilk. And the song was also recorded by Glenn Orland, a wonderful storyteller and a fixture at the Yelko Cowboy Poetry Gathering every year, until we lost him in February of 2015. Now, basically, this is the story of a couple of young cowboys who spot a renegade steer they've been hunting for a long time. They try roping him and things go wrong and they both get bucked off and the steer is on the fight. One of the boys scrambles up a tree and the other one runs into a cave, but he keeps running out of the cave because, well, the steer keeps chasing him back in. And at the end of the song, we find out why he keeps running out. So here's my favorite version of this week's classic Song of the West by Ivan Daines. It's Jake and Roni.
Jakey and Roni was a-riding along. Jakey was a-singing what he called a song. When up from the gully what should appear an old moss-back Suki and a bald-faced steer. Jake took after with his hat pulled down. He built him a blocker that would stop a town. The steer he headed for the setting sun. Believe me, neighbor, he could hump it and run. Roni followed up his partner's deal. Just two old waddies that could head and heel. Both of them were working for the chicken coop with a red-hot iron and a hungry loop. The sun was shining in old Jake's eyes. He wasn't looking for no big surprise when the steer gave a wiggle like his shirt was tight and he busted through the junipers and dropped out of sight. Jakey's horse done a figure 8. Jake done his addin' just a mite too late. He went out of the saddle a-seein' red and he landed in the gravels of a dry riverbed. Roni's horse was a good horse too. He couldn't quite figure out why Jake flew, so he dumped old Roni where the ground was hard, and they both lit out running for the home caviar. Jake said a holding of a swellin' thumb, said he, well, I reckon we was going some. But Roni, he hollered, get away from here, we're both gonna tangle with that bald-faced steer. Roni clumb a straddle of a juniper tree, there's no more room up here, said he. Jakey, thinking himself to save, he crawls in the opening of a cut-bank cave. The steer he charged with his head way down, rolling his eyes and paw on the ground, hooking and a snuffing and a turning about, and every few seconds old Jake would pop out. Roni said, you old fool, stay back out of sight. You act like you're hanking for to make him fight. Jake, he hollered so the world could hear, stay back nothing, there's a bear in here.
Well, Steve Porter is a fine cowboy poet blazing the trail east of the Mississippi River. He lives in South Carolina, and he recites at a lot of the big gatherings, including Alpine, Texas, and Sierra Vista, Arizona. And this is one he wrote called Bill versus Progress.
Now, Bill was getting along in years, just loved the simple life. Spent most of his days a horseback, free from toiling from strife. Never owned a darn computer. iPods were not his style. iPhones were too complicated. He liked the kind you'd dial. But modern ways were pushing hard, and Bill, he began to bend. So he bought a brand new cell phone and threw caution to the wind. He figured he'd join the crowd. What trouble could it be? They told him he'd be cool, you know, and it had a guarantee. Now Bill was good at riding broncs, could fan 'em with the best. But soon this new contraption would put old Bill to the test. He had this big stout 4-year-old, the finest bay you'd see. But unlike that brand new cell phone, broncs don't have a guarantee. So Bill decides to take a ride and see what old bay'll do. But before he rode too far away, that bronc just breaks in two. He lines Bill out upon the ground. That old bay sure could buck. Bill climbed back on and said a prayer, just hoping for some luck. Old bay now settles down a bit. Bill's nerves are calm and cool, until that darn old cell phone rings and Bronc acts like a fool. It seems now Bill had sprouted wings, went sailing through the air. that phone had caused a tragic wreck, turned hope into despair. It too had also taken flight to regions far and wide, and though he searched and combed the earth, that cell phone sure could hide. So Bill told Cody, "Call that beast, we're sure to hear it beep, and even though I'm cool, you know, we're gonna plant it deep." Just how to end this cell phone's life, he knew just what to do. With a boot heel placed dead center, his misery would be through. So now among the sage and sand, a new grave can be found. Scene's progress had its boxing match, and Bill, well, he had won that round.
Thank you so much for making the ride this week, and I sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. And thanks again to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. Check them out at meadowsprings.com. And if you get a chance, take a ride through our website at hugh-mclennan.com. And by the way, the best of 2015 is now available on an audio CD right there on our merchandise page. Oh yeah, I was just reading through the latest issue of Alberta Beef Magazine this morning. A lot of great information in there, and you can subscribe to this fine publication as well as Beef Illustrated by calling 403-250-1090. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.